Hey, what's going on, ADPI Nation? We have another incredible guest for you today on the ADPI podcast. My name is Kevin Brenner, and I am, I guess, now considered a longtime host of the Active Duty Passive Income podcast. But I am your host today, and these podcasts aren't about me; they're about our guests. And today's guest, Alex Jarbo, is a Marine infantry turned real estate investor, entrepreneur, syndicator, hotelier. I'm sure I'm missing some things, Alex, but what we're going to talk about here today is we're going to be digging into kind of that transition, leaving the Marine Corps and jumping into entrepreneurship, which if you're listening to this podcast and you're into entrepreneurship, that's a good thing because that's what we're going to be talking about. Also, we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into the short-term rental side of things. Alex is working on a super interesting project that I want to hear about. It's a if I'm reading this correctly, a $20 million treehouse community, which gives me some like Endor vibes if you're into Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's like a short-term rental, vacation, boutique kind of vibe. But I want to talk about that because that's just a super interesting project. But also talking about the market, like what is going on with STRs. And I love reading these things like the Airbnb bust, and it's everything's on fire and it's going to hell and all of this stuff. We're going to talk about that and kind of your professional opinion on where that is going and how STR operators, many of whom are listening to this podcast right now, how they can maybe separate themselves from the market and they don't have to jump off the ship just yet. But before we get into that, let's do a little bit of military background, my friend.
Yeah, man. I was thanks for having me on, by the way. I started Marine Corps 4.5 years, or 4.5 years. I was in the Marine Corps fresh out of high school. Didn't even have a summer vacation. Um, Originally part of the Marine, I was originally 0311 infantryman, and then I was selected to be a part of the honor guard to go over to Washington D.C. So did my entire enlistment at Marine Barracks Washington. Did my advanced courses in the winter, and we would do all the training, infantry training in Quantico and whatnot. Last year, the Marine Corps decided didn't want to reenlist, so I just started picking up a whole bunch of different books on general business, leadership, real estate books. The original BiggerPockets books had sort of caught my eye originally, but yeah, I was the Marine Corps stuff was. I mean, my enlistment was. I had an incredible time. I was part of the honor guard there. We did all the Friday night parades, Tuesday parades, and then
Mm-hmm.
the all the
And this
any
is
type
like
of
barracks row, like you're at the
yeah, Barracks
commandant's
Row.
house.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
anything that
yeah.
happened at Arlington was us. I was in charge of at one point the Marine Corps 21 gun salute team, but there are, if I remember right, 4 or 5 like 21 gun salute teams that would rotate through Arlington, and I was in
Okay.
charge of the Marine Corps one at one point. And then for 2.5 years, I was in charge of one of those teams where we would do like, depending if it was our duty week or not. I mean, we were not doing like standing guard at like 4 to 5 funerals a day sometimes, like in the
Wow.
week, a
Yeah.
day. Yeah. So like sometimes we would knock out like close to 10 funerals in a week, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, for folks who haven't been to DC, it's really cool where the Marine Corps Commandant's house is. So like there, obviously there's a ton of generals here in the area, just a ton of senior leaders, and a lot of them actually live on Fort Myer. Some live on Fort McNair. So Fort McNair is like where I live in Southwest DC,
Yeah.
and there's some
Correct me if
generals'
I'm wrong.
houses there.
Fort McNair is also where the war school is at, right?
Yep,
Too.
that's where.
Yep.
Exactly. Yes, and then
We've
there's
snuck it.
also
We've snuck into there and done some fishing off the side over there
uh-huh,
before. I
yeah,
remember
and
that. Yeah. Yeah.
the best, honestly, dude, the best thing about Fort McNair, if you're a DC local and you're military and still have an ID and can get on post, cherry blossoms at Fort McNair, like there's no
Interesting.
one there, no
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
because I can't get on, but they are beautiful and they line all the river because it's right on the Potomac. All they line the general like the back of the houses and it's just free. You can just go and walk and like avoid all the crowds of everyone on Potomac Park.
Yeah.
But
Best fishing in DC's there too. Like I
Oh
said.
yeah, right there. But the commandant's house is super cool. It's in an area called Barracks Row, and that
Yeah.
place has blown up in the last 10, 15 years. It's just like cool
It- It's
restaurants and like
it's crazy
walkability.
too. Like when you walk past it too, you don't know the parade grounds are there because there's like 10, 15 foot walls, and you're like you
Oh
don't
yeah,
know
you
what's
don't
on the
see
other
it.
side of
Yeah.
that. You could
Yeah,
just
and
walk
and
past
there's
it.
like there's the guards, on the corners and stuff, and it's just really it sounds like a really really cool assignment to be as far as spending your enlistment there. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Um, But all right, man. So you were doing that. Now, how in the heck did you jump from that to business?
Yeah, I just I got engaged, but I was in the Marine Corps. And I didn't. I'm not gonna say that I didn't want to get married, like be married in the Marine Corps. I business has always. I mean, I've always been drawn to business in some sort of way. And so that last year, I just any type of free time I had outside of I was also going to school online, but any type of free time I would have, I would just have a book with me, just reading, whether it be waiting on the coach bus at Arlington for like a funeral to start or something. I was reading some sort of real estate book. It's funny because I started with the BiggerPockets books, and now
Mhm.
I'm like one of the writers for BiggerPockets
Oh yeah.
for their short term rental content. But yeah, it came from just wanting to do something beyond the Marine Corps. I also wanted to finish up all my degrees, so I had most of my bachelor's degree by the time I got out. So it took me like 3 4 months to finish it up by the time I got out of the military, got my MBA, and then right now I'm finishing up my doctorate. So I mean, I joined the military to get a free education, and along that also came a really cool duty assignment that I had.
Yeah. Wow. So you were able to leverage going to school while you were in the Marine Corps and then getting out, finishing with an MBA and now going for a doctorate. Is it a
Yeah,
business?
I would
What
I
degree?
would tap out my tuition assistance every single year if I could. Yeah, I mean, shoot, I remember whenever I get stressed, I think about this. Like I was at advanced infantry school in Camp Lejeune
Mhm.
when like I had a class. So like it would be like Monday through Friday being like in the field, and then like Saturday, Sunday, like finding a place that had Wi-Fi to like do my papers and stuff.
Yeah, it's just like
Yeah,
hustling on multiple different fronts.
yeah,
But obviously it paid off. So you kind of got interested in real estate, hooked up with BiggerPockets, and I'm sure you read some influential books along the way. It sounds like you did. What was your first deal like?
yeah. So when I first moved to Asheville, which is where I currently live now and where all my properties are at, I
From
was
so
originally
from
part of a
DC, you moved
yeah
to Asheville, North
the day
Carolina.
I got out of the military. Yeah,
Perfect.
I got a NAM, I got a Navy Achievement Medal at the Lincoln Monument, and then that same day I moved like moving truck directly to Asheville where I live. And originally I was part of a flipping mentorship as well while I was still in the Marine Corps for like the last like 4 or 5 months.
Hmm.
And I was like on a group coaching call with that mentorship, and it was like the guy who was in charge of the mentorship was like all he had just unpassing had just mentioned that all of his long-term wealth was tied into short-term rentals. Again, this is back in 2016.
Hmm.
And he so that really like perked my ear, so I got on a one-on-one call with him, and he sort of helped. I was like, hey, I'm really open to moving anywhere. Originally from DC, but I was like, if DC doesn't, or not DC, sorry, I'm originally from Detroit.
Hmm.
And I was like, I'm not really open to moving back to where I grew up, or at least not right now. So he had taught me how to choose a vacation rental market, and we decided on Asheville, North Carolina, with the help of my fiance, now wife. And yeah, I got here, got my broker's license, got both like sold and bought, like helped on both sides for about 2 years while I was looking for a property for myself. I knew I want, like I said, I knew I wanted to get into vacation rentals. My very first couple deals were rental arbitrage deals, but the
Hmm.
very first deal that I had purchased was actually a new construction, like ground up development. It was an 800 square foot A-frame. Where that came from was that just looking at properties on the market, and at that time everything was either way out of my price range or it was in my price range. It just wouldn't have done well as a vacation rental. So my very first real estate project that I owned, like my investment
Hmm.
outside of the two rental arbitrage deals, was that new development project, which is apparently not normal to do.
Yeah.
Like to
Well,
build your first rental.
and I'm going to briefly cover kind of the arbitrage. If people are listening to this and like, what the heck is an arbitrage? So you can
Yeah,
arbitrage
yeah,
anything. First of all, a positive arbitrage is pretty much when you lease something and then you sublease that thing and you take the spread. It's called a positive arbitrage, right? Of course, there can be a negative arbitrage. Don't do that. But you want that. And in the short term rental game, what you do is you go and find an owner who wants to get a long-term lease. Maybe they're looking for a year-long tenant, and you go and say, "Hey, how about I sign you up for 3 to 5 years at a certain amount of rent, and it's stable." But then you go around and all legally and everything. You go and sublease it and tell them, "Hey, I'm going to turn this into a great Airbnb. There's going to be you're going to have the cleanest house in the neighborhood. Blah blah blah. All this stuff, insurance, the whole thing." And you go and sign them up and then you go and take the spread. So you're converting long-term rent, which you're on the hook for, to daily rent. And usually, if you picked your market the right way and you've done the analytics, you'll find that wow, there is a lot of money to be made. That's what I do in the Northern Virginia area. Works like a charm. And Asheville is a great vacation rental market as well. But that's just a brief, super brief overview of the arbitrage. Of course, if you're interested in more, you listen to this podcast and you're like, oh man, I want to get more arbitrage stuff. We have the Military Short-Term Rental Academy. You can just go and check that out. But Alex, talking about so you moved to Asheville, and the first thing you were like arbitrage, and this is because it sounds like you were plugged into some sort of mastermind.
Yeah, it was originally that flipping mastermind, and then
Mm-hmm.
I purchased a course that I just found by just listening to a podcast, like a
Sure.
random podcast. And that was Brian Page's B&B formula, which is funny because I'm a coach. I coach like 1-2 hours a week for them now.
Mm-hmm.
That was another same thing with BiggerPockets. Started by reading their book. Same thing with B&B formula. Started with just the course that cost like 1,000 or two, and then it rolled into just Brian reaching out to me be a coach for them. But yeah, I mean, along the way, I've always had some sort of either course, mentorship, or books that I was like
And
helping
that
me take.
that is
Yeah,
the most important bit for people who
yeah,
actually want to take action. I cannot foot stomp this enough. You've taken courses. I've taken. That's how I learned short-term rentals. I didn't just walk into it one day. I purchased a course, and
yeah,
you know what? I accelerated my learning 10x, probably 100x. Took action, and then built my own course because I was like, hey, this rocks, and we can do a lot of good here. So anyway, the point is masterminds, courses. That is the next level. If you're listening to this right now and you're like, God, how the hell did Alex? He was enlisted, left the Marine Corps with probably, I assume you weren't rolling in dough, you know, like, and packed a moving truck in DC, moved to Asheville. How the heck did he get to where he is now? Guys, you got to educate yourself. You got to surround yourself with the people that are doing what you want to do. And yeah, you were in a house flipping mastermind, and maybe you flipped a couple houses. I don't know, but that doesn't mean that just because you're in that mastermind doesn't mean that you're not going to learn something else, or that person who is teaching the house flipping isn't involved in some other business that might, I don't know, pique your interest, pique your curiosity, and make you go and want to do something. But you gotta put yourself in that room. And
yeah,
if it costs you $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $10,000, I mean, shit, how much is college? Like, what
yeah.
are
I
we
mean, I've
doing?
so far. I mean, and for people who get to like once you start progressing through the levels, I mean, I hate to say it, and it's not to scare anyone who's listening, but like, I mean, those masterminds and those coaches only get more and more expensive. It's not a bad
Mm-hmm.
thing. It's just you're leveling up through there.
And it's the
I
people
think the
that are in
biggest,
the room with you too. Like
yeah,
as you
absolutely,
level up,
yeah.
that people they get higher and higher
That
quality.
that's another thing too is when you start getting into like, I mean, my coach I pay $30,000 a year to. It's,
Mm-hmm.
I look at that as like a small salary, where it's practically a consultant. But when you start getting into those higher levels, what I've realized is you're practically buying into a network as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
when you're dealing with people at that high level, as long as you've done your due diligence on the coach you want to bring on, you're practically buying into their network because they more than likely they have a pretty significant network. Going back real quick to that mentorship thing, for especially tying it, I love being on military podcasts because I can speak on some of this stuff that wouldn't be normal just in the normal civilian world. Is it's so important to have either a masterclass coach, group coaching, something coming out of the military if you're not going to school for what you want to do, because I think we underestimate a little bit when you're in the thick of it, like active duty, enlisted, officer, whatever. Sometimes you might not realize like the type of support system you have in the military, whether it be through mentors or just like good people around you.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that's most of that stuff goes away when you get out, and like it's almost like a little bit overwhelming when you're like, I can technically do whatever I want now, but like when you're in the military, you're like, I had a roadmap where like I was an infantryman. I couldn't go do engineering stuff or like admin stuff. Like I was an infantryman by trade,
Like you
and
had
that
a
was my
lane
entire
and you had to
focus. Yeah,
like stay in that lane.
exactly. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's why like some people do so well in their MOS because it's like that's it. Like this is the roadmap. This is how you do well for the most part. When you get out of the military, people don't realize it's a little bit overwhelming because you're like, I could technically do whatever I want, especially if you have a full GI Bill. And then sometimes I'm not saying options are a bad thing, but it's like it's good to have some sort of mentor or coach that can sort of realign you to like realign your focus and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah, and just the other thing that I'm sure you get this question all the time as a coach, but like, um, well, I don't know how to get started, or not only how to get started, I don't know what area to focus on. And what I tell my students is just what you got to do is just research the different options that are in the realm of possibility. Find something. If you're reading about something and say it's short-term rentals and you're like, man, that would be kind of cool to be like a short-term rental host or whatever, and like talk to guests, and if that piques your curiosity in any way, shape, or form, and you're thinking about it more than just going, oh, that would suck, then that's the one. Pull the thread on that and see where it goes. Pick one, pull the thread, see where it goes, learn, network, take action, and then you can move on to the next thing once you get experience doing that one thing. But I'm sure you see this, Alex, all the time. So many people are like, well, there's so many different options I can do. What do I do? And they ask you, and you kind of have to answer their question with a question. Well, what do you want to do?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's fine to try different things.
Sure.
Just because you land on one thing doesn't mean that that's not what you're gonna do
For
from
the next
like,
20
from,
years or
yeah,
something. Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
like
Yeah, yeah,
but you gotta pick one and you gotta take action. You can't let analysis paralysis take over. So going back to your story, Alex, you started doing the rental arbitrage. You came to Asheville. You had this mentor. He kind of told you about this. What was your next step when your interest was piqued about short term rentals and the rental arbitrage model? You get to Asheville. What happens?
yeah. It's like so I had the flipping mentor, and
Mm-hmm.
then started just helping people buy and sell real estate when I got my broker's license when I came here. I was still finishing up school, but it felt like almost part time coming off of like a military tempo, like a schedule. Um, so yeah, I was just buying, selling, and then when I realized like I couldn't purchase one at that time at my budget is when I started to build that first one. And then once we were done with that first one, we got a really good deal on the land, which I've done in 2 hour trainings on just this one deal before. But essentially, we got a really good deal on the land, which allowed us to leverage into two other developments right next to
Mm.
it. So that one slowly turned in, not slowly, really quickly turned into two other units. I brought on some investor capital with some friends that saw what I was doing, and we built out four other property, purchased and built out four other properties. And that slowly, the beginning of last year, I started to raise my own capital and
Mm-hmm.
started talking to funds to team up with them to do some larger projects. When I say larger, it was like anywhere between like 4 to 7
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. So that was sort of we were working on a 6 unit development deal while at the same time purchasing a 7 unit cabin community that we own right now. And then that sort of brought me into the world of what we're currently working on and raising capital for, which is this treehouse community that surprisingly is in my market right now. But I mean, all together, if you include the one that we're purchasing right now and all the future development that we have planned just off of the properties that, because most of our properties have land where you can build more on them. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think I've said it's anywhere between like 38 to $40 million just in this market alone.
Wow.
Um,
So
yeah,
of assets under management that you're looking at, and
yeah,
the
just
potential
and
that's there.
that's just vacation rentals. Yeah,
So just going back to that first deal, because you're right. I think it's pretty rare for someone to do a development deal out of the gate. Um, because when you said new construction, I was like, oh, you bought like a new construction home and turned it into a short term rental. But this is like
no,
you
yeah,
bought the
custom built,
land.
custom stick built. Yeah,
Yeah, you bought the land and you said, I'm going to. So from the jump, you knew that this was going to be a short term rental, this 800 square foot A frame
yeah.
situation.
At the time, I did underwrite it as a long term rental as a backup. It's a
Sure,
little
sure.
bit, in my opinion, it is a little bit harder to do that after COVID. Yeah, like
Hmm.
having like a third exit essentially, like planned as a long term rental. You could midterm rental, you still could, but I've never ran the numbers on my properties for midterm.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But out of the gate, I mean, it's always wise when you're underwriting. You need multiple exit strategies, right? That's the so that's the great thing about real estate and in development specifically. You have a lot of exit strategies presented to you that just takes more time for you to realize it. So you built this first one, and you started you turned it into a short term rental. At that point, did you say, like, what was your light bulb moment that you were like, oh man, I I can build two more of these? Or was it like, let me get the operations of this first one, let's start cash flowing a little bit, let's do a proof of concept? Like, what was the timing like from, hey, I got this first one built,
yeah.
to holy crap, this works?
So let's talk about that very first one because I love using that one as a case study. So that first one we used at the time there were no like vacation rental loans out there, at least the ones I could
Sure.
find. So like I got a second home loan essentially that was like 10% down, and it was a construction loan that you could tie the. It was residential, it wasn't commercial, that you could tie the land into it.
I
We had
see.
found a parcel that was 4 acres total, and it was two-acre parcels.
Hmm.
And the bank would not land on both of those parcels. So essentially, the goal turned into getting that first parcel to appraise for the purchase price of both of them because they were listed together. So like they were like, hey, this one parcel is the parcel that you're building the property that you want to build on. We can't lend on the other one in terms of
I
it
see.
needs to
Because you
just
can't
be one
tie the
parcel.
construction loan to the thing. I
Yeah,
understand. 'Cause it's
to
two
two separate
parcels. Right.
parcels.
Right.
So my agent was like, "Hey, I mean, this might be a shot in the dark, but let's just try to see if we can get that first parcel to appraise for the purchase price," which we ended up doing, and we were able to
Interesting.
write. Yeah, we were able to write a contract for $1, which the sellers were out of town, like in terms of they didn't live here, and they were as long as they got their price, which we never renegotiated. They were fine with signing a contract for $1 at closing. So
Did
essentially once
they?
we yeah
I'm sorry. Did they? Because I find this very interesting. Did they have the two parcels where they split up?
they
Did
were
they? But
yeah.
the previous the sellers did they have them split up on purpose, or was that just happenstance that they were just
No, they just
had these
that's how they
undeveloped
had
parcels
purchased
of?
them. Yeah, they used it as like storage. They had like a boat on it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So it was just like a storage unit for them. And then so yeah, they were fine with like signing that contract. I mean that opened up an entire world that I didn't even know existed with like playing around with lands, like
Hmm.
land was subdividing land before and after closing and whatnot. But with us being able to get that parcel for $1 at closing, once that very first one was built, I immediately once I got the CO certificate of occupancy on the first property, which means like it's you can like live in it now
Hmm.
or start renting it out and start furnishing it. I immediately turned around and got a second construction loan for two more properties on that parcel that we got for $1. We used that land as collateral
Uh-huh.
to qualify for the loan. And I mean, I literally, I meant to frame it this month, and I've had it for like what 4 years now. But like literally, our closing cost on that loan was like $5.21, like five and a quarter. It was crazy. But along with that, the very first property, like last year, after debt service, meaning like mortgage payments,
Hmm.
after all expenses,
TITI, the whole,
yeah,
yeah. Hmm.
all of that, that property cash flowed last year like 54 grand.
Wow,
And
that
then it's
first 800 square foot A-frame.
that first 800 square foot A frame, and that one
Wow.
is done anywhere between 40 grand that first year all the way to 54 grand now. And my out of pocket expenses with the down payment and the furnishings for that first one was 40 grand. So like I always say, like my cash on cash is technically infinite
Infinite.
because
So you mean to
after the
when?
first year I got 100%. Granted, I've always liked to preface that with this was prior to COVID.
Sure.
So I would tack like 30 to 40% on that number now, in terms of like construction costs and what it costs to actually build it.
Hmm.
But if you're looking to do just one or two to start, I mean the numbers can get pretty insane.
And it's really interesting to me. Okay, and let me back up here. The numbers on the land. How much was it to get? I understand you got the second parcel for $1, and it's just some you did and you didn't, but like the total for those two parcels, what? How much was that? Just
45
raw
grand.
land,
Yeah,
45 grand, and then it cost you how much to build that first A-frame?
it was
That was
about
another.
100. Yeah, it was 180 grand to build it, like just
Okay,
vertical.
100.
Yeah.
Okay, just ground 180 grand to build it. So talking numbers, you're in this for 220. This first deal before you
Plus,
build the other
plus,
two.
yeah, plus holding costs and furnishings, you're looking at about like 250 total.
Okay,
Like,
call it
yeah,
$250,000. Great, $250,000, and what you're left with after that $250,000, which, by the way, guys, we're making it sound like a lot of money right now. Go and buy an improved structure. Go look for a quadplex right now. I got my first quad was it 4 unit for 350, and the second one for 318, and that was back in 2018, 2019, respectively.
did you
I
use a
sold
VA loan?
the first one, yes,
Yeah,
and then
which
the
you're allowed to do. People don't
yes,
know
you're
that.
and people don't know that. I know that's
Yeah,
crazy, and And I sold that one for 815 in January of this year. But that's what I'm saying. Prices have gone up. So to say like, oh, you're in this deal for $250,000, it's not that much. Now, granted, prices have gone up, this, that, and the other, but I don't want people to be intimidated by those numbers. But the point is, you're in this for 250, and you go and set it up as a short-term rental, and you're saying in year one, your cash flow, not revenue, cash flow of the year is 40 grand. Now let's break that up into, what is that per month? That's probably math in public, 3,600
Math in
a
public.
month, give or take,
No,
something like that.
it's more than that.
I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's about
3,600.
30. Yeah, 3,300 like cash flow
So
on that first year.
3,300 a
Yeah.
month per. So just for the listeners to wrap their heads around this. And the reason I'm bringing this up, because in ADPI we have this thing called our military financial freedom number, which we, in our new boot camp course, which you can get if you're in ADPI campus for free, but you can get that and you walk through it, and pretty much it's like, Alex, for your essay, it's just like, hey, what's my desired cash flow number? And then you figure out how many doors I need. And typically in a long-term rental, if you can get $200-$300 a month a door in cash flow, that's pretty dang good. But in the
Right.
short-term rental industry, what you're talking about is $3,300 a month. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, I have a $10,000, my military financial freedom number is $10,000.
A
And you're
month.
like, I need 25 doors. Yeah, you could if you're doing long-term rentals, but you can do three, like 3 or
Yeah.
4
So that
short-term rentals.
that
So
was
like,
exactly the thought I had because again, like I said, I started with the BiggerPockets books where they were
mm-hmm,
like, "Hey, 3 to 500, you're good to go. Like that's a good rental.
that's great.
Like that's a
Yeah.
good long-term rental." And then, like I said, also I was doing the 2 rental arbitrage units that were cash flowing anywhere between, depending on the season, 500 to 1,500 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And when like obviously like you don't know what you don't know. Like when I was like I know it's gonna do well because the mortgage payment was so low. Like I could be like I could rent this out for $100 a night, $80 a night, and be fine. But after that first year, that was the exact thought I had. I was like, I could have either done 10 long-term rentals or just this, even though it was really like when I started with the construction, I again didn't know what I didn't know. But it's
Sure.
like, even though it was way more stressful to build that very first one, because I was just learning, it's still, I guarantee it would have been way more stressful to go through 10 closings, like to get 10 units and 10 other tenants and whatnot, even if they were long term. So yeah, I
Sure.
mean, it's just like if your number is 10 grand a month, I mean, you would technically only need 3 of those.
Yeah, and to bring this first deal to fruition, I think you said it was a 10% down construction loan wrapped into the whatever loan
The
product
land,
you got.
yeah, it was the land, no holding costs because it was residential and no furnishing, so no
Mm-hmm.
FF&E.
Mm-hmm.
That had to come out of pocket. Just out, like I
Okay,
said, out of pocket. It was about 40 grand.
so
Yeah.
out of pocket. Okay, yeah. So that's good to point out too. Out of pocket, you were on this about 40 grand, which is
Yeah,
not.
and
It's not
people don't know holding costs, just more like mortgage payments,
right.
like how much it costs because you the
You
way
got to pay the
construction
mortgage
loans
while you're
work.
building it. It doesn't get built
Yeah,
overnight.
yeah, it's
You
like
know.
the way construction loans work is like you pay your interest, like interest only period for the money that you've borrowed so far. Again, I don't want to confuse anyone with that,
Yeah.
but holding costs are just mortgage payments that you're paying during the construction period.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
Rome wasn't built in a day. So, but the point is, you're all in. Like we said, 250 is what you said, but that's not what you brought to the table. You personally brought to the table about 40 grand. So when we talk about that cash on cash return, you made 40 grand in the first year in cash flow. So you're at 100% on year one. That's crazy, man. That's awesome. So you made your initial investment back in a year, and then it's just off to the races. So the next question for you is, okay, so you have this other parcel, which I'm sure you figured out by now how to combine it into one parcel, going through some zoning situation or whatever you had to do. I don't know.
yeah, we just kept it, put a portfolio loan on it, so it's
Yeah,
like
just kind
the
of wrap it
parcels
up.
were
Yeah,
separate just in case we ever wanted to sell them off separately. Again, completely other strategy,
yeah, yeah.
completely
But
different
but
strategy. Yeah.
but then you said, okay, this works. Let's build 2 more of these bad boys. Were you at this point? Were you like, well, should I use other people's money? Should I
No,
or
it
were you just
honestly
like,
came from COVID happened, and my buddies were sitting. Some of my friends were reaching out to me, and they're like, "Hey, I just either inherited this much or I saved this much money when I was in the military. Like, can we do something together?" I only did that with 2 people, and
mhm,
they were 2 separate projects. One that wasn't a military friend; it was someone who I met here that I'm very close with, and then another one was a childhood friend that I went to boot camp with. That obviously we're just like brothers at this point, and yeah, it turned into, okay, I got these up and running. Let me go do more. COVID definitely threw a wrench in all that for sure,
Sure,
with
sure.
construction costs and everything that we probably like delayed for like a month, like a year and a half, because things just got crazy with like prices and whatnot. But yeah, it just turned into that. The two other ones I did with my friends were log cabins. So
Oh, interesting.
the one with my military friend were two modulars that were essentially foundation built and then just dropped these beautiful cabins on. And then the other one was a log cabin with a that came with another unit that we renovated that was like detached. Yeah.
And what's the out of pocket on those modulars? Because I always find that that's a great way if you're going to implement the short term rental model, and you can get something that's really nice, but then you can reduce your construction costs. Like you got to put the foundation in, but and make sure the utilities are there and all that. But then what? How much for the top half?
Yeah, it's at that time it was I would say it was like 20 to 30% cheaper. I will say that make sure you trust your. We went through a couple builders during that process that actually it was about the same amount of time it would have cost to just build them from stick.
Mm-hmm.
It's still, I mean, they still cash flow really well, but I would say it's probably 20 to 30% cheaper. It's way faster. Like you said, it's way faster because essentially they're able to build those properties in like 6 weeks in a warehouse while your foundation is getting done. That's in a
Oh, so
perfect
kind of
world.
like doing the
Granted,
same thing.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
you
Simultaneous.
throw in the worlds of permits and
Sure, 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 sure.
people not showing up to work and stuff complicates things a little bit. But yeah, the modulars. I mean, it probably 20 to 30% cheaper to do it that way. It's just you don't really have too much say in the floor plan for
Of
like because
course, yeah, because
they're
it's
mainly
gonna be what it's gonna be.
yeah.
So okay, that's super interesting. Okay, so you had these three built out. You kind of went through COVID. What are some for the short term rental hosts that are listening? What are some tips that helped you get through COVID in the short term rental industry? Because I didn't come into the short term rental game until on the end of COVID. I was like, it was like 21, late 21 is when I got into the game. So
Yeah.
I didn't have to deal with the brunt of it of like everyone canceling and people lighting their hair on fire.
Yeah, so for in our market, I would say the short-term rentals were only like closed down for 2 months.
Oh
And
wow. Okay.
so I was always I mean, just from the beginning, again, reading those books, having good mentors in my life. I mean, no matter what investment you're getting into, you want same way that people teach you like you need 6 months of reserves for like personal. Same thing with that. I mean, we had 3 to 6 months of reserves built into each one of our properties. I mean, it's in every single one of my budgets, whether we're doing 20 million or whether we're doing 180,000. It's 3 to 6 months that is built in and put on the side for mortgage payments and expenses. So that's how we got through that. Midterm rentals. I mean, we only had three when COVID happened,
Mm-hmm.
or at least I had three developments when like ones we purchased. My rental arbitrage units. The owners ended up selling because the properties like doubled and tripled in this area, just like anywhere else. So it for those owners ended up
Oh, because
selling
everyone
again.
was leaving the city and they were coming to Asheville,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Asheville
Yeah,
was
yeah.
definitely one of those transplant cities, like during
I
COVID, where a
see.
lot of people migrated here. So that like the way we got through it, midterm rental before it was like I feel like midterm rentals everywhere now in the last like 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
But we just honestly put the properties up on Craigslist in like areas that like both in Asheville, but like we're close to Charlotte, Raleigh, Nashville, and we filled those rentals just those 2 months until we were able to operate again. Outside of that, obviously cleaning, just making sure that we're really on top of our cleaning, which my cleaning company understood anyways because we use the third party cleaning company. So yeah, that was just that. And then honestly, during a lot of people got into short term rentals during COVID, and outside of that initial first lockdown, most of our properties are in a more rural setting. They're not in downtown.
Oh, okay.
Um, I want to say most, all of them are,
Yeah,
but I mean, short-term rentals did really well in that year and a half, 2 years after COVID. I would say
they
right
did.
now is a harder time. I mean, you're talking about the B&B bust, which we can talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
But I would say right now is probably a harder time to get into short-term rentals and find a profitable property than it was during COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I definitely want to talk. Yeah, let's talk about that now because I want to finish with the treehouse community because it just blows my mind. So don't let me not talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's a big thing, in our mastermind, in our coaching calls, and people are a little skittish and what should I do? Da 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 da. With everything that's going on with Airbnbs, and I did a couple webinars on this, just kind of some myth busting and all of this, and looking back at the statistics. And I think one of the most telling statistics, I don't have it in front of me right now, but if I recall, it was you know, Airbnb was nationwide occupancy, I think was down 7% from last year than it is this year. But when you compare that with pre-COVID numbers, still up 19%. And so like people are like, oh God, it's down 7%. I'm losing. But at the end of the day, no, you're still we're still way up from when it was when before Airbnb specifically went public. So it's just interesting. But I'm curious your thought as another operator, and obviously everyone's market is different. But what do you see out there with the quote unquote Airbnb bust?
Yeah, so the Airbnb bust. So that came from I
Other Airbnb hosts looking to get other people
I'm
out of the market.
95% sure that hashtag, actually probably closer to 100%. I'm sure that where that title, that article, I
Yeah.
gotta watch what I'm saying here because I don't want to seem like I'm talking about anyone here. That came from BiggerPockets. Like that initially was an article that got then eventually got picked up by Forbes like 2 days ago, and
Oh
then it
my
went
God.
everywhere after that. That article was written by one of my peers because I'm one of the main writers for vacation rentals for BiggerPockets. So when I saw that, I was like, I can't say anything. It's just like I hate when people put like blanket statements on everything to just be like all of Airbnbs are bad or all vacation rentals are bad, and that's the biggest thing that I think attributed to there has been a drop in occupancies, there has been a drop in average daily rates, mainly because a lot of people got into vacation rentals during COVID, where they saw any type of property and they purchased it
Yep.
because one, it was easy to purchase properties with 2.5% interest rates, and like they were just seeing everyone like talking about how we're talking about here, like we made all this money with vacation rentals, and they just took that property, threw it on Airbnb, and they're like, I'm good to go. I'm in vacation rentals now.
And that is the thing, man. It's this like, well, I snapped a couple pictures with my iPhone. I don't
Yeah,
understand why I'm not
with my
making any
iPhone
money.
10. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't know.
yeah,
I would laugh harder, but I think I have like a 12, and I don't even know what
yeah,
number
yeah,
they're
yeah.
up to now.
So I wanted to go lower, just in
Yeah.
case.
But no, yeah. Continue.
Yeah, so that's I think that's the issue is like going forward. And I actually just wrote an article for BiggerPockets that should be published in the next week. It's probably going to be out by the time this comes out. And I talked about just the future of hospitality and the
Hmm.
future of vacation rentals. Because no matter what business you're in, you need to be treating it like a business. Taking a
Yes.
property and just throwing it on Airbnb is not treating your property or properties like a business. What does that mean? So my properties are Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, going multi-platform. All those in my industry are called OTAs, online travel agencies.
Hmm.
Those should just be looked at as marketing arms to your business. So like it's where the eyeballs are at. So like you want your properties in front of there. Eventually, the goal is to be able to completely control your guest. And so what does that mean? So every single one of our properties has StayFi in it. And what
Yep.
StayFi is, and I've plugged StayFi 100 times.
Love them. Love them.
I'm not going to say I'm good friends with Arthur, but I talk to Arthur at least once a month, who's the owner of the company. That StayFi is a little disc that plugs into the back of a router, and it creates a landing page for your internet. Imagine you're going to Starbucks, airport, you have to put your email address in to get access to the internet. Usually can get access, usually can get someone's email address if they're booking with you, but that doesn't include everyone else that's staying in the property. You can ask for it still, but it's just way easier through StayFi. Like one of our properties sleeps 16 people. I'm not going to
Yeah.
send an
You
email
get
out
the
to
one
collect
person.
every.
You get, yeah. Can I get the rest of
Yeah,
your emails? They're gonna
yeah,
tell you, yeah,
exactly.
go
So,
pound sand.
so there's nothing against terms of service, and I've talked to Arthur about this too. There's nothing against terms of service of taking someone off of a platform after they've stayed with you. You can't do it when they're trying to book with you. So if like a reservation request comes in through Airbnb, you can't be like, hey, book through this link instead, because
Hmm.
that's completely against it. But after they've had a good stay with you, after they've stayed with you, StayFi allows you to create an email list, which is key. You're also able to collect phone numbers if you want to do SMS like messaging. And then StayFi now has the capabilities through a partnership that they did they have these templated emails that are vacation rental specific. You can literally just plug the emails in that StayFi is
Hmm.
collecting, and then we're now sending out like seasonal emails, or we plan to like send out seasonal
Yeah.
emails.
Come
That way,
stay
you're
with me.
creating this.
Get a 10% discount. Blah blah blah. Book
Exactly.
direct.
And we're
Yep.
pushing
Hmm.
them towards a direct booking site. And I just wrote that entire article about this. That way you have complete control over your guest, where Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, if you're able to get your property on Expedia, it's a little bit harder depending on what type of property you have. But those are just marketing arms. That is where the eyeballs are at. Once you get them through your funnel, I look at the property as a funnel. You are then creating an email list, and then you're pushing them towards a direct booking site. What's beautiful about that is the direct booking site and the email list is a business asset when you decide to sell your property, or when you decide to sell your business or whatever. It's the same thing like if you're like selling water bottles online.
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, I look at Facebook and Google ads as Airbnb VRBO. It's the same idea. You're
Marketing.
creating an email list and then you're remarketing. So
Yeah.
that is where hospitality is going. I don't like it when people say I'm in Airbnbs. No, you're in vacation rentals. Taking a step further, you're in
short-term
hospitality.
rentals. Exactly. Yep. Oh my God, dude, we are totally aligned, 100%.
Yep.
And so many hosts don't understand the tech. They don't understand the marketing. They don't understand funnels. They don't understand any of this stuff. For me personally, I use StayFi, and then I drive them to, I have it zapped over to MailChimp, and then I have MailChimp automations that send emails and all this stuff. It does it all for me. And my assistant handles a lot of that stuff in the back end. But it's really, really cool to see people find people through Airbnb or whatever OTA you're using, offer them, like, they have a great experience with you, and then they start getting emails, and then they're like, wait, I can save money. And then the direct bookings start coming in, and you have more control over anything that goes on, and you don't have to pay these service fees, which can be pretty expensive. I mean, overall, marketing in a business is expensive. And when you're using Airbnb and other platforms, it gets really, really expensive. So keeping an eye on your expenses is obviously key to running a successful business. You gotta pump that NOI, net operating income. Alex, man, this has been great. Okay, we got to talk about it because I know we're running out of time, and I don't want to jump into the bonus round without talking about this treehouse community. So give me your elevator pitch, my friend.
Yeah, so we started working on this property February of this year, and we built an entire investor website and everything. We've been marketing it for the last couple of months. But this property just came from, honestly, telling my agent what I was looking for, and it is a massive. It's only I say massive, but it's a 20-unit community. Every single one of these units is completely unique. 7 of them are already built. There's another 13 that are in the process of being built right now. 7 of them will be done by the end of this year. They're already dried in, which means like they're finishing up the insides and whatnot. But in my opinion, it's like the top hospitality property / investment in the country right now. We've treated it like a high-end commercial luxury real estate acquisition, in terms of like the entire syndication we've put together for it, pitch deck. We have a appraisal done by CBRE, which is the top real estate financial services firm in the country. And it's crazy because it's 20 units and we're purchasing it for $20 million, which puts it at about like $1 million a unit. But the net operating income, the NOI, the debt service coverage ratio, all these fun little metrics that come with commercial real estate, all of those have been like, it just, if you compare it to like a multifamily deal, it completely blows it out of the water.
Hospitality is insane. Yeah.
So it's cool because like we were talking about hospitality, like hotels usually are used to operating in that 60 to 65% range with probably an expense ratio, meaning like the expenses with salaries, debt service, everything's about like 50%. So like that's the spread there. With properties like this, where, I mean, we're still achieving like 80, 90% occupancies. We don't like to be above 90% because that means like we're underpriced.
You're leaving money on the table. Yeah.
So this community, without getting like way too into details, I mean, this community has gone viral multiple times across all social media channels, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. It probably has over, last time I checked, like close to 50 million views across all channels, just from the videos we could find, the ones that had gone viral. So that's a completely other world that we started doing with one of our other properties, is like utilizing traveling influencers that are actually, I hate using that word, like people who have like big communities that are easy to work with, come to the property and film it and whatnot. So social media marketing is a big part of this whole strategy. And it's a gorgeous property. It's on the side of a mountain. And the owners have done just a phenomenal job at developing this property. I mean, they started the first one back in 2016 and it's just spiraled. It's just grown
in a
to
good
what
way.
it is
Yeah.
now.
Spiraled upward.
Spiraled upward. Yeah.
No. But so this deal, you guys found it, and obviously they started developing it. Who knows when? Probably if they got the first one done in 2016. I'm sure they bought it in 2015 or something like that. 'Cause
They've
things.
lived up there. They've lived up there for like I think 20, 30 years, and they
Oh,
live
so they
next to the
lived
property.
on the
Yeah,
property and now they're developing their property
yeah,
into this thing and then they're just
yeah.
selling
They
it off.
started like when
Oh, that's interesting.
I'm sure we're gonna put it in the show notes somewhere. But when you guys
Yeah.
see the property, we did brought out like one of the top drone guys in the world to like come and shoot this property with one of the best teams I've ever. We shot for like 4 days on the property, and they'll be able to see it. Like they ended up doing like an entire like luxury subdivision that's a part of this. So it's pretty crazy. I say it in the investor video, but like this property is built into an HOA, which is the complete opposite of what I've taught anybody about how to
Don't
invest
purchase
in real
those, but
estate.
when you're
Don't
owning it.
purchase it in an HOA. This one, this luxury community in this HOA, the treehouse community existed before the HOA did.
Okay.
So it's baked into the HOA. There, no matter each person has just one vote, but literally in the HOA documents, it said it cannot be voted out of the HOA no matter what, which is nuts. I've never seen that before.
That's really
Yeah.
awesome. So you're and the model is you're going to run this treehouse community is going to be short-term rentals and then the luxury community is long terms or what?
We're not the luxury community are single family houses that are
Oh,
owned by
it's not. Oh,
separate
you're not
owners.
purchasing that. That's
No,
like
no, no.
oh,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
all oh, that's interesting. So
Yeah,
it's
it's all one thing. It's like and they'll see it in the video because the gates in the video.
mhm.
Like it's a gated community, and then you take a right, you're in the treehouse community. If you go left, you continue to go up.
But you
And
can
like
never.
go,
What you're saying is the risk of the HOA voting you guys and saying you can't do short-term rentals here anymore and destroying your model. That's not a risk because it's baked into the bylaws that it can't happen
exactly.
like
Yeah,
this. Yeah. Okay. No, that is super, super important for people underwriting and looking into this opportunity because that's a massive risk, whether it's government or whether it's even more hyper local at the HOA, COA level. You gotta cover your butt with that. I mean, that's what the government recently shut down one of my short-term rentals, and I converted to a midterm rental. I'm doing fine. I'm not worried about it. But like, you got to pivot, you know.
the other
And
side to that on the city side and the local side is that this property has indefinite conditional use zoning that runs with the property. So
perfect.
like
Yeah.
it's approved by the city. Like
Yeah.
there's like a 30-page document that's a permit that will like the city can't take it away. Or I
That's
mean,
great.
anything can happen in government, but like it's
Sure,
there.
sure.
Yeah,
You know, you can fight for it, and that's what lawyers are
yeah,
for.
yeah.
But so, at the end of the day, there's what 7 of these. There's 20 planned to be developed, and you know, you guys have it under contract, and it's being sold with 7 of them built. And are those 7 currently running as short-term rentals,
Mhm.
or
Yeah,
not yet?
they're year to date without getting too far into the details. Their year to date off those 7 is like close to 7 figures already.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's is that top line or is that
yeah, that's top. It's top
that
line. Yeah,
yeah. No, that's great. So even if you're close to 7 figures, you're close to, you know, 500,000 of that is you know, assuming a 50% expense ratio, you're still doing pretty good if you have 13 more coming down the pipe. Anyway, super interesting stuff, man. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes and we can talk about it more. But guys, this is the kind of opportunities that are in short-term rentals and people like exotic stays and you know and now I bet even with the new Airbnb update when they put the treehouse thing in there where you can filter
oh, it's already
by
there.
treehouse.
Yeah,
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 I know. Like,
yeah, yeah,
you know, that's the really cool thing. Like when I remember everyone was complaining about that update that Airbnb did. Like, oh, I can't find my
oh, last
listing
year.
anymore. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you're like, hey, treehouses, yes.
Yeah, it's funny because all of our properties are unique in a certain way, so they all fell into one of those categories. And I'm
Right.
like,
So you got like more eyeballs on yours while
yeah,
everyone
yeah,
else was just like, oh man.
yeah,
All your students or whatever, like, this isn't fair. And you're like, yeah, totally. Buy more tree houses,
exactly.
buy weird shit.
Yeah, yeah. Build weird shit.
Yeah. All right, man. Dude, this has been a lot of fun. I love nerding out about short-term rentals with people who get it, who understand the business and have that military background. I think our listeners learned a lot. I got to take you to the bonus round. Same 4 questions that I ask each and every guest. Are you ready, my friend?
Let's do it, man.
Question number 1: what book or software has really been crushing it for you lately?
Uh, Probably the most influential book I've read in the last like 5 years. And I read it really early before I mean, I was like in the middle of building that first one, Creature from Jekyll Island.
Hmm.
Nothing. It's just it's a book on the Federal Reserve, like the history of Federal Reserve. Nothing to do with real estate in any way. But I forgot when that
Interesting.
book was written. It was, but it was really interesting to see how everything played out during COVID. With like how much money we printed and stuff. But it's a really cool book of like just understanding how like the financial markets work, and just how understanding how money works, like in
Yeah.
both the national economy, but also the global economy. So with the U.S. being like the federal, like the reserve currency and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah, it's all about the dollar. And if you guys are following global economics and you know the BRICS countries that are coming together, they're trying to make their own currency to try to usurp the power of the dollar, and that is how you piss off the mighty United States Navy. Because you
Yeah,
know,
our
want to know what the
military in
Navy
general.
controls? Shipping lanes. And you
Yeah,
want to know where money comes from? Trade.
yeah, exactly.
So that is kind of for people who haven't connected those dots yet. Um, yeah, read that book. I think it'll open up a lot for you. Question number two: who is your biggest hero and why, Alex?
Hero? Oh, that's
Yeah.
hard. Yeah, that's a difficult one. I don't like going like celebrity route. I'm not gonna say hero, but like a really good mentor in my life has been Paul Moore from Wellings Capital.
Hmm.
He's the one who sort of took me under his wing initially when I just had like one unit, and introduced me to all these really cool people. He's the reason why I even write for BiggerPockets. But
Paul's
yeah,
incredible.
Paul
He's
Moore
been
from
on the
Wellings
show. Met him
Capital.
multiple times.
Oh, has he? Yeah, no,
Yep.
Paul's a phenomenal guy. Yeah, I helped him run his booth at BiggerPockets 2 years ago, and then he's the one who ended up getting me on BP. And then he's very honest. Like when I first put together the
Super nice
syndication,
guy.
he was like, "No, this isn't gonna work." I was like, "Thank you. Like you just saved me a year." Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, Paul's an incredible guy. He wrote the book on self storage, and
yep,
if you ever talk to Paul, well, obviously listen to the episode. I don't have the episode number in front of me, but listen to the ADPI podcast episode, and Paul is a big believer in the boring business. That's what he will tell you. I am in the boring business, and he
yeah.
says the boring business makes billions, and he's
Yeah,
absolutely
he
right.
stayed. Paul stayed at one of my properties before here. We've had lunch here before. And it's funny because I'm like on the complete opposite spectrum of a boring business, and I've
Yeah,
tried to get it.
yeah,
He's like,
treehouse is boring.
yeah, we're talking about like laser focus. I've tried to get him to invest in the all of our properties in the last like 3-4 years, and he's like, nope, self storage. He's like, just focused on what you're doing. You're doing great. I was like, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's 100% what he's into, and it was great. I had a breakfast meeting with him here when he was in Northern Virginia. I think he's in like Kentucky full time. That's where
Yeah,
he lays.
Lexington.
Yeah, that's where
No,
he,
no,
he
no, wherever Liberty University's at, that's where he's at.
I think it is Lexington. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Paul, great guy, awesome mention. And if you're listening, Paul, what up? Question number three for you: what do you like to do for fun?
I've been a magician since I was 10 years old, and that's
That is
always
the coolest shit I've heard of.
yeah,
And obviously,
that's
my next question is show me a trick, but you're on a podcast, so I'm not going to ask you to do that.
yeah. I've my mom was a school teacher, and she actually worked at the school that I went to in Detroit because my school was K through 8, and I was very introverted as a kid, and that's actually how she got me into like it was just like free magic classes to start, and then I brought that with me in the Marine Corps too. Like I would just do like street magic stuff. Like I mean, we lived in DC, so like we would just go out and do like I would with my friends and whatnot. And it's cool because it's transformed. Like I'm touching like next year I'll be 30. Um, in the last 20 years, like the last 5 6 years, it's been like a cool networking tool at like real estate events and stuff. Like it's really cool to be talking about your deals, but you're like when you're actually into like a conversation or even at like a bar or something, you're like, oh, you guys want to see a trick real quick? And then it's like, well, okay, this is weird. And then initially, then it's like, oh, this is actually really cool. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's like snowballed into this like really cool like networking thing that I do at like real estate events and whatever events that I go to.
Yeah, everyone loves magic, man.
Yeah,
If you don't
it's not like
have
I'm pulling
fun,
rabbits out of hats. It's actually like cool
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, like the sleight of hand, and no, I love that stuff. And I think there was remember Daniel Tosh? I don't know if he's still relevant or not, but he had a comedy bit, and he's like, "It is impossible not to have fun on a jet ski."
Yeah,
He's like,
exactly.
no one
Yeah, yeah,
frowns on a jet ski, and I feel like
yeah,
the same thing is said for like magic. So you cannot. It is impossible not to have fun watching someone who's good at magic do magic, even though you know it's like it's manufactured. It's still incredible. Like you don't.
yeah, yeah.
So that's really cool, man. Um, question number four for you, arguably our most important question, Alex. If you had three nuggets of wisdom for people who are listening to this podcast right now and they're aspiring, they want to get into short-term rentals, say, or hospitality business or something like that, what three nuggets of wisdom would you share with them?
Yeah, we talked a lot about like books, mentors, coaches, but you said
Mhm.
it right after that. It's I would say that's 50% of the equation. The other 50% is just acting on that. It's just
Mm-hmm.
understanding. You said analysis paralysis earlier, like understanding that and this isn't to scare you guys, but you're probably going to make mistakes. 50% of knowing the information is 50%. It's like you need to go out there and take action. You are going to make mistakes. Just understand that. But that's part of learning. It's like there's certain barriers to entries for every single business that you're going to get into outside of vacation rentals, and understand that the people who you see on these pedestals have their entire path has been littered with mistakes. So that's the first thing, is just start. And then the two other things is the second part to it is just what we talked earlier, is just having a mentor in your life. And if you can't afford a mentor, books are mentors, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If you, no matter what, say like vacation rentals, half of these books behind me are real estate. The cool thing about real estate books is most of these books are not like New York Times bestsellers. The way I found out about Paul Moore was I read his Perfect Investment book, which is a book
Mm-hmm.
on apartments. And then I reached out to him, and you'll be surprised how many authors you can reach out to when you start like niching down in a certain industry. So that's number two, is just the take an action one, importance of a mentor. And then I don't know, number three is just consistent action. I schedule anywhere between 2 to 3 hours a day to just work on one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that snowballs into just an insane amount of results. It might not feel like it when you're doing it on a day to day, but when you look back at it a year, 2 years, 5 years, it's pretty crazy, like what you can achieve.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. I love that. Guys, you heard it here. Alex, Marine turned short-term rental operator turned owner of a treehouse community that he's currently raising for, which sounds super intriguing, super interesting. And who knows, it might be something that ADPI Capital will have to get wrapped up into. But I love me some
Yeah, man.
treehouse stays. So Alex, thanks so much for coming on the show. For folks who want to get in touch with you and do exactly what you just said, to reach out to these authors, podcast guests, everything, how can they reach out?
Yeah, I'm most active on LinkedIn. And then I'm also very active in like any type of comment that gets left on my BiggerPockets post. I like to respond for the most part, unless if it's like some craziness. So just, yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best
Your
route to
article
go.
sucks.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love that, dude. And I'll tell you, BiggerPockets loves it too, because I'm like, I remember I wrote real quick. I wrote an article for them that like went completely viral. It was one of my first ones, and I was like, yeah, there's a lot of hate in these comments, and
Oh,
they're like,
dude,
oh no, that's good. I was
that's
like, should I
good.
respond? And he's like, the editor was like, there's no point.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, just let them fight. So, anyways, LinkedIn, BiggerPockets, and if you guys want to check out that the Treehouse
Mhm.
community, I'm sure you guys are going to link it somewhere, but it's openatlas.investments. That's like the entire website that we built out just for that one investment alone.
Mm-hmm. And the community is called Open Atlas.
Just openatlas.investments is the website. Yeah,
Oh, I understand.
Open Atlas is our company.
Oh, I see. I see. I see. I see.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay, cool, awesome, Alex. This has been super cool, and I appreciate you coming on the show, man.
Appreciate you, brother.